India claims to be the fastest-growing major economy on Earth, yet global investors are quietly pulling hundreds of billions of dollars out of the country. If you look at the official statistics, you see a picture of complete strength. Recent quarters boast a 7.8% GDP growth, easily beating out the central bank's own forecasts. This is the Indian government's 2025-26 economic survey. Look at the key takeaways: promoting robust GDP projections and historically low inflation, averaging just 1.7%. Further down, the document points to record-breaking trade data, highlighting exports crossing $825 billion. By isolating these specific macroeconomic indicators, the government projects a highly curated image to the rest of the world. They want to show a booming market, perfectly insulated from global chaos. But those headline numbers are acting as a deliberate facade. They project a fortress of stability while masking deep, severe structural rot right in the foundation. This chart tracks the Indian rupee's value over 12 months. Watch it take a historic plunge to nearly 96 against the US dollar. Simultaneously, massive capital flight occurs. Foreign investors pulled 2.7 trillion rupees out in a single 6-month window. A nation cannot claim robust economic health when international capital is aggressively rushing for the exits, and its currency is rapidly losing purchasing power. To understand this structural weakness, look at India's energy dependency. To survive, the country imports nearly 90% of its crude oil. That heavy reliance means any geopolitical tension, like a Middle East naval blockade, acts as an uncontrollable external shock, drastically inflating India's national energy bill overnight. India's economic destiny isn't controlled by lawmakers in New Delhi. It is held hostage by the volatile global price of a single barrel of foreign crude. And the mechanics of the global oil trade are brutal. India cannot buy that oil with rupees. It must aggressively sell its own currency to acquire the US dollars that the market demands. This chart maps out a devastating cycle known as the double whammy. Higher global oil prices trigger higher demand for dollars, leading to a massive devaluation of the rupee. Because the rupee is weaker, oil imports become far more expensive in local terms. This loop destroys the nation's foreign exchange reserves. In just 4 months, $61 billion in reserves entirely evaporated. If you subtract physical gold and other illiquid assets, India's usable cash reserves can now barely cover 6 months of necessary imports. When those dollar reserves drain away, the nation is stripped of its financial armor, leaving the entire economy totally exposed to the next geopolitical shock. As energy and transport costs surge, the pressure moves through the economy. Small manufacturing units face a sudden spike in input costs. Without large cash reserves to absorb the blow, these units are forced to shutter, wiping out the purchasing power of the average citizen. This official government graphic shows a scenario with unemployment declining to 4.8%. But that data only tracks a fraction of the formal workforce. It ignores the reality of those small manufacturing hubs. Quiet government reports reveal the truth. In a single 3-month window, 2.7 million jobs were annihilated in the informal sector as businesses collapsed. And with the rapid expansion of AI and automation, this job crisis threatens to multiply by the end of the decade. Everyday private consumption makes up 60%. They must vigorously defend the collapsing currency, but doing so actively prevents them from stimulating a dying domestic economy. The central bank is forced into a defensive crouch. They have no choice but to prioritize basic macro financial stability and rupee defense over any actual domestic growth. The ultimate victim of this trap is the dream of a $5 trillion economy by 2025. Today, that dream is completely stalled at $3.9 trillion. India's central bank is out of ammunition. They are trapped by deep external vulnerabilities that standard monetary policy simply cannot fix. Relying on top-line GDP growth in isolation is a deceptive way to measure an economy. An emerging market's true resilience is determined by 3 things: the stability of its currency, its degree of energy independence, and the genuine confidence of international capital. India's long-term demographic potential remains massive, but it cannot be realized under these crushing conditions. Until the nation fixes these deep, structural fault lines, its heralded economic miracle rests entirely on borrowed time and borrowed dollars.